All right, colored pens up. Now let's see how we did with this moderate level question. Moderate level question. What did you get for the value of x? We'll start with John, Davis, then Ziomara. John, what did you get?
5.
Okay.
I also got 5.
You also got 5. Okay, Ziomara?
5.
The correct answer is 5. Now, this is a moderate level question. The difference between a moderate level and a high level question really has to do with the number of steps and whether or not you are allowed to make decisions. Okay? Whether or not you're allowed to make decisions about what to do. There are no decisions to make here. You really just, or actually there are. There's a couple of different approaches you can take. But this is not really a high level question. Some of you struggled with it. But that's because you just didn't understand the idea of a triangle. So we're given this value, the area of the triangle. So we're talking about area and we're talking about a triangle. Could someone start us off? How do I find the area of a triangle? Okay.
Base times height times 1/2.
That's right. So many of you missed the 1/2. It is 1/2 base times height, or you could say base times height divided by 2. Either way is the same thing. So many of you did a great thing. Many of you realized that you were going to have to multiply this times this. And so I saw a lot of students who wrote x plus 6 times x plus 5 equals 55. That was great, except for the fact that you neglected that. You are missing a key piece right there. So if you wanted to be accurate, it had to say 1/2 base times height. Many of you went a step further. I even saw some people wrote down on their paper how to do this. So let's forget about the 1/2 for a second, and let's just focus on this. How can I simplify that right there? What method can we use? Extol? FOIL. In fact, you should be so good at it at this point that it should take you like 5 seconds. First terms, x squared. Outer is 5x, inner is 6x, add them together, you get 11x. And then the last terms, plus 30 equals 55. But again, you cannot neglect the 1/2. So what do you do with the 1/2 that's sitting out there? How do I deal with that? Nathaniel? If you're very, very, very smart, that is what you will do. If you didn't realize you could do that, then you probably distributed the 1/2 here, which unfortunately becomes very ugly because you end up with a decimal right here. It's not horrible, but it becomes a little bit ugly. If you're super high level, then you do this. Times 2 times 2. That will make that disappear, and now we are left with x squared plus 11x plus 30 equals 110. What must be true for us to use one of these methods for solving this equation? Something has to be true before I can proceed. One detail has to be there for us to proceed. What's the detail that's missing? Edgar? Has to be equal to 0. Very good. So how do I get the 0 over here? Edgar, what do I do? Yeah, subtract 110. You've been doing this since last year. Subtract 110 from both sides. And so now here's where we're at. X squared plus 11x minus 80 equals 0. Now we can solve for x. We now can use any of these methods that I have listed up here. Greatest common factor, difference of two squares, perfect square trinomial, grouping, the trick, graphing, or square roots. We haven't learned this last one yet, quadratic formula, but we can use any of these other ones. Anyone have a good idea on what we could do? You're on a roll, Nathaniel. Go for it. Yeah, well, you could do the trick, but you don't even need the trick. The trick is only really necessary when there's a number other than 1 there. This is actually a simpler form of factoring that you learned a long time ago. Since that's an x squared, you already know that it's going to be x and x. So you just have to figure out what two numbers multiply to this and add to this. What are the two numbers? I am not going to tell you. You figure it out right now. Good, I see lots of people wrote down everything. Excellent. You got the two numbers? What are the two numbers? Think you got them? Hold on a second. Hold on, let me give everyone else a chance. You think you got it? Okay, good. Okay, Danielle, what do we get? 16 and negative 5. 16 times negative 5 is negative 80. 16 plus negative 5 is positive 11. And so now it is very simple to solve. X plus 16 equals 0. X minus 5 equals 0. That's negative 16. That's 5. Since you cannot have a negative distance, it has to be the positive answer, and so x equals 5. So this is what the problem was really all about. Any comments, questions on that? Dalton? What's that? You used the half at the end? Okay. So that's where you went wrong? Good. I'm glad you recognized that. Now, there was another approach. What's the other approach you could have taken that would have skipped over all of this? But how can you do that? There's a middle term. Yeah, you got lucky, unfortunately. Danielle? Multiply 55 times 2, good. And then what? Boy, you guys you're so used to working hard, which is great, but you're missing the easy stuff too. Davis?
Well, how I got it, I picked the like 5, since it was 55, I chose 5. I plugged it in, and what I got was 11 and 10, and when I multiplied it equals 110. And if you divide that by 2, you get 55.
Very good. Does anyone know what the name of his method is? It has a name. You don't know the name of the method? You learned it probably 2-3 years ago, Chris. Yeah, it's called trial and error. Guess and check. The only issue is that many of you did not remember this detail, but if you remember that, then look at all you have to do. Pick a number for x. Try 2. 2 plus 6 is 8. 2 plus 5 is 7. Do 7 times 8 is 56 and divide it by 2. Does it come out to 55? Okay, then you got to try a new number. Try 3. 3 plus 6 is 9. 3 plus 5 is 8. 9 times 8 is 72. Divided by 2, you get 36. That didn't work either. Let's try 4. 4 plus 6 is 10. 4 plus 5 is 9. 10 times 9 is 90. Divided by 2 is 45. Is that the right answer? Try again. 5 plus 6 is 11. 5 plus 5 is 10. 11 times 10 is 110. Divided by 2 is 55. So yes, this is algebra, and yes, you are supposed to know how to do this. But sometimes when there's pressure and you are taking a standardized test and you're stressed out, you forget things. So use guess and check. Trial and error. You guys are bright young people. You guys can figure things out on your own. Okay? Comments, questions, concerns on the warm-up? Extol, you had a comment, question? Nope. Any other comments, questions? Good. Draw a line across your page. Today we are going to continue our study of quadratic equations by learning how to utilize the quadratic formula. Before we get into it, I'd like to redirect your attention to the whiteboard over here, where I've been keeping a list of the methods and techniques you've learned over the past month or so. Number 1, factoring, was all of Chapter 9. In fact, if we forget about everything below it, you spent a lot of time trying to learn how to use all of these methods. Greatest common factor, difference of two squares, perfect square trinomial, grouping, and the trick. At the time, the trick was our last resort. We are always trying to do greatest common factor, see if it's a difference of two squares, a perfect square trinomial. Grouping was a special case that worked with 4 terms. But if none of those worked, then we resorted to the trick. The trick was the last resort. That changes starting today. The trick is no longer your last resort. The quadratic formula is now your last resort. Now the sequence is greatest common factor, difference of two squares, perfect square trinomial, grouping, the trick, square roots. Graphing is another method, but it's not very practical, so you have to know how to do it. But I wouldn't necessarily use it if you're trying to find solutions. And then the last resort becomes the quadratic formula. The reason it is a last resort is because even though it is effective and you all have the formula memorized, there are instances where you can very easily make simple mistakes because the formula is pretty complex. So we want to avoid putting ourselves in a situation where simple mistakes can be made. So, it is all based on this. You must have the equation in standard form. Once we have standard form, then we can pick out A, B, and C. A, B, and C are numbers, as you already know. And then we take those numbers and plug them into this formula. I would also like to remind you that my expectation is that at any moment, upon request, you should be able to stand up and say x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a without hesitation, without any errors. That is the expectation. You were asked to memorize this 5 months ago. So now today you are going to be using it. Notice that the formula says x equals because we're using it to find solutions. That is its purpose. Does anyone have any questions so far about the sequence that you are expected to know or the formula itself? Now I'm going to be trying to help you see where most mistakes are made. The most mistakes are made right here. It seems simple enough. I had one student who did this lesson already before you guys, who did the homework assignment and got more than half the questions wrong for the exact same reason, that they messed up minus 4AC every single time. So I'm going to be going over and over again why that's an issue, and you probably won't have an issue with it. Okay? But I'm warning you now that that's the biggest area of concern. One other smaller area of concern is I have a few students who forget to do that part. They start focusing on this complicated looking thing so much that they forget to divide by 2a. But don't worry, we'll get to all that. So we're going to jump right in and solve an equation. As Edgar reminded us during the warm-up, to solve an equation, we need it equal to 0. What do we need to do first? Sebastian? Beautiful. You said that beautifully. Add 6x to both sides. But we are also going to make sure that we put this in the right order. So the x squared term comes first. We get 4x squared. The 6x comes next. Minus 7 equals 0. Any questions on why or how we did that? Good. Now the formula is based on 3 numbers, A, B, and C. Could someone tell us what is A? What is A, Valerie? Good. What is B, Alexandra? Good. Sebastian, C. What is C? Very good. So it's easy to pick out the numbers once it's in this form. So we're going to write down the formula. X equals the opposite of b, or negative b, plus or minus the square root. You can make a really long square root symbol. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Any questions so far? Good. X equals, well, b is 6, but we put the opposite of 6. Negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared. We are a very bright group of young people, and you have all the perfect squares memorized already, so there's no reason to write 6 squared. You can just write its value. Someone tell us what is 6 squared. Dalton? 36. 36 minus 4 times a, which is also 4, times c, which is negative 7. All over 2a, and there's no reason to write 2 times 4 because we can do that mentally. Kalasia, 2 times 4? 8. Very good. So we have the quadratic formula filled in. Does anyone have any questions so far? This right here is the spot that I indicated was where students make mistakes. Because what you have to understand is that that's really a negative 4 times negative 7, and the result of that is going to be added to 36. Let me say that again. That's really a negative 4 times negative 7. You could probably do it mentally. I would do the negative times the negative first. So, here's what we end up with. x equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of. Now we need to do negative 4 times negative 7. That I can do mentally. Chris? Positive 28. And I love how you said positive 28. And then 28 times 4, because I didn't use that yet. Well, that's easy because I could do 20 times 4, and then I could do 8 times 4. What does that come out to? John? We multiplied something. It's 28 times 4. The second part you did. Yeah. So it comes out to close. 112. So what this means is this whole thing right here has a value of 112. But since I already used the negative sign, this is now 36 plus 112. Well, we're also high-level math students again, so I don't know if I need to waste a whole line of work by writing that. So I can now do 36 plus 112 and write down my answer right there. So what's 36 plus 112? 148. Very good. All over 8. Does anyone have any questions on how we got to here? What has to happen next? Michaela? Not square. Square root of 148. Is 148 a perfect square? Everybody should be shaking their head like no, because everybody knows. So we need a calculator. Everybody's calculator works a little bit differently. You'll see mine. Mine's kind of funky. It doesn't even have the symbol. Mine actually says SQRT. Mine, you have to type in the number and then push the square root button. If you have a scientific calculator, you might have to push the square root button and then punch in the number. So everyone find out you square root on yours. You already did? Good? Got it? Okay, so what is the square root of 148? Yeah, it's going to come out to approximately 12.17. So, here's where we're at now. We are at x equals negative 6 plus or minus 12.17 all over 8. And what this means is we have two expressions. We have two expressions to simplify. We now have to do x equals negative 6 plus 12.17 divided by 8. And we have to do x equals negative 6 minus 12.17 divided by 8. So that's just a calculator issue. You just punched it all into your calculator. 6, turn it negative, plus 12.17 equals, divided by 8. What do you get for the first solution? That's not an option, so you have to solve that issue. Matthew? No, but then we divide by 8. Got to do the whole thing. Yeah, you get approximately 0.77. So one solution is approximately 0.77, and that's one of them. What about the other one? 6 negative minus 12.17 equals divided by 8. What do you get for that one? Kayla? You get negative 2.27. X equals negative 2.27. So we use the quadratic formula to find these solutions. So, started here, worked our way to here. And for those of you who didn't realize, from this step I went here and here. Comments, questions, concerns so far? Okay, now I want to show you something. Anyone know what we're looking at? Oh, a bunch of people know? Oh, that's impressive. Davis, what are we looking at?
A parabola.
We are looking at a parabola. Anyone know which parabola we're looking at? Huh? Positive? What do you mean by positive? It's opening up. Very good. What else? John? Okay. Maybe. Very good. What else? Nathaniel? Okay, it has a minimum. Good. Excellent. What else? Dalton? Okay, we translated down 15 units. Okay, what else? You don't recognize it? Yeah. Say that again. Oh, yeah, it's the parabola to the equation we just solved. So could someone tell us, how do these, this, and this relate to this? To be quite honest with you, I should see every single hand up, because every single person is supposed to know. Like so? It is? Oh yeah, it is. It's where it touches the x-axis. So let me zoom in for you so you can see exactly what we're talking about. Every single person in the room already knows this. Let me move this down. Right there and right there. Oh wait, is it the wrong one? I'm sorry, it's the wrong one. I messed up. See that? I put it in the wrong order. There it is. I apologize. That's the right one. Sorry. So it was supposed to be, but I somehow mixed up the order when I planned it out. Well, I feel a bit silly. But right here, that's one of the solutions and that's the other. Could someone approximate that location right there where the hand is? Where is that approximately? Dalton? Yeah, it's exactly it's just about exactly 0.77, but you could tell it's about 3/4 of the way. And then at negative 2.27 is about negative 2 1/4, right there. So these two locations are the two solutions that we just solved for right here. But we didn't have to draw the graph. We used the quadratic formula to find them. I apologize for the confusion with the graphs. That's totally my mistake, but you see it now. Any comments, questions on this? All right, well, you've only done it once. Let's see how you do on your own. Checkpoint number 1, solve this one. We got 3 minutes. me a thumbs up if you have an answer at all. Okay, put your thumbs down. Take another 30 seconds. All right, so what'd you get? 5 confident people. We'll start with Kayla, Chris, Dalton, Michaela, and Davis. Go. Okay. Okay, Dalton. Okay, I think that you've all said the same thing so far. Michaela, what'd you get? Okay, okay. Davis?
I had x equals 0 and x equals 15.92.
Okay. So we do have some disagreement. The correct solutions are 0.5 and negative 3.75. So now your job is to determine whether or not you got it right or wrong, and if you got it wrong, to find your mistake. So now I'm going to show you what it looks like when you get down to the simplified inside the square root symbol. Could someone tell us, after you take care of the square root symbol, what is inside? Basically, I'm asking what's the whole number that should be inside? 5 people can tell me. Extol? 1,156. Most likely, if you got this question wrong, then you wrote the wrong number in here because you did not calculate that properly. Anyone not sure where their mistake is? Okay, give me a thumbs up if you got the question correct. Good, put your thumbs down. Guess what? Don't get discouraged. It's only the second time you've done it. Not a big deal. Now we're going to do it again. But before we do, let me show you, because I messed up a moment ago, now I'm going to show you the graph of this one, which you actually saw already. I accidentally put up the wrong one. So here's what the graph looks like when you can zoom out and see the whole thing. Oops. Zoomed out a little too much. Okay, so what is going on? So this is the graph, but when you look at where it crosses the x-axis, you can see right here, crosses at 1/2, and it crosses at negative 3 3/4. So this is the graph, and you can see the equation right here. And this program graphs it for us. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, so now let's try another. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I wanted to now summarize for you where we're at. You do not have to copy this. Everyone look. Put your pencils down on your desk and look up here. This is the same thing you see up here on my whiteboard, except I've added some details. And there's also a method in here that you're not going to learn. So first of all, we spent a lot of time learning factoring. That was all of Chapter 9. So that's one method. Graphing is another method. You learned that at the beginning of Chapter 10. That was 10.1, 10.2, and 10.3. Finding square roots was 10.4, the last lesson. That only works when the equation is in this form. Completing the square, you are not going to learn. My advanced students should read this section of the textbook and or watch a video on Khan Academy, which is linked to my website, or Algebra Nation on completing the square. You don't need to know how to do the method for this year. However, to understand how the quadratic formula was designed or how it was come up with, you have to know how to do completing the square. So you are not going to learn this year. This is for my advanced students only. Okay? And then, lastly, quadratic formula. Here is what I think the sequence should be from now on. I think you should try to do square roots first. That's what you should do. That is by far the easiest. Second, you should try to do factoring. And third, you should do the quadratic formula. You have to know how to do graphing, but if all I'm asking you to do is tell me solutions, it's not practical. If I'm asking for a solution or a root, then you should do finding square roots, factoring, and then the quadratic formula in that order. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, now we're going to go into the second example. The instructions are different, but the goal is the same. X-intercepts are the same thing as solutions. Find the x-intercepts of the graph of the equation. Here are the instructions from before. Solve the equation. Solve the equation. That is the same thing as finding the x-intercepts. The only difference is that there's a y here. So it's very simple. We replace the y with a 0 because x-intercepts are found when you put a 0 in place of y. You learned that a long time ago in chapter 4 where it says graphing using intercepts. To find x-intercepts, you make y equal to 0. So this is what we end up with. Now, try all the different methods. Can we use square roots to solve this? Someone raise their hand and answer my yes or no question. Can we use square roots to solve this? Just 3 people can tell me? Fung? No, we cannot. Okay, what about a greatest common factor? Is there a greatest common factor? Nathaniel? No. Is it a difference of 2 squares? Dalton? Is it a perfect square trinomial? Only 2 people can tell me? 3 people can tell me? Kayla? No, it is not. Can it be grouped? No. So now we could use the trick if we wanted to. We could try that. But today is about using the quadratic formula, so now we're going to skip to quadratic formula. It's already in standard form, so someone tell us, what is C? What is C? Valerie? Good. What is A? Alexandra? What is B? John? Good. So, now plug in. We already know the formula, so I don't have to rewrite it again. The opposite of B is going to be positive 9. Plus or minus the square root of. B squared. What's negative 9 squared? Someone raise their hand and tell me that. Valerie? Very good. 81. minus 4 times A times C. All over 2A, which I don't need a volunteer for, that's a 4. So the first thing I need to do, what we need to do, is figure out this. And then after that, immediately we need 81 included as well. So we have negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times 8 is negative 64. What's 81 and negative 64? You already got that, Nathaniel? What is it? 17. Very good. So here's where we're at now. X equals 9 plus or minus the square root of 17 all over 4. Use your calculator because 17 is not a perfect square. 17, hit the square root button. What's the square root of 17? What's the square root of 17, Sebastian? 4.12. Very good. So here's where we're at now. X equals 9 plus or minus 4.12 divided by 4. Now we branch off into two expressions. Now we've got 9 plus 4.12 divided by 4. And we've got 9 minus 4.12 divided by 4. What do we get? There's two possibilities. You're sitting there because you already did it, or you're frantically trying to do it right now. Okay, Sebastian C., what's the first one? Yeah, this comes out to 3.28. So that's one solution. And what about the second one, Danielle? Comes out to 1.22. These are the two solutions. To the equation. Anyone have any comments, questions, or concerns about how we did that? Once again, I want to make sure you're making the appropriate connections. Here is the graph of that one. And I am positive that's the correct graph. And so you can see the two locations where it crosses the x-axis, just like Extol reminded us earlier. So these two locations, here and here, match the two numbers that we just solved for right here. Approximately 1 1/4 and approximately 3 1/4. Let's see if that matches. Yeah, that's about 1 1/4 and that's about 3 1/4. It matches perfectly. Does anyone have any questions about the graph or about how we did this? John? Well, think about the quiz that you just took, okay? In some cases, I asked you to graph, and in some cases, I just asked for the solutions, right? And so when I'm just asking for solutions, what I'm trying to tell you, and I'm telling you over and over again, is you can use any of these methods to tell me solutions. If you need to graph, because I'm asking you to, then you have to graph. It just depends on circumstance, okay? All right, so now is your second chance to prove that you're understanding. Find the x-intercepts of the graph of this equation. And you've got 3.5 minutes to do it. What'd you get? Start with Valerie, Matthew, Kalasia, and then Chris. Okay, Matthew, what'd you get? So I think that was the same thing that Valerie said. What'd you get, Kalasia? So also you agree with them? Okay, Chris, what do you think? So all four of you agree, and that is correct. For my students who may have gotten it wrong, and I didn't survey yet, but I just want to get it down, this is what it looks like after you simplify inside the radical. You get negative 50 plus or minus the square root all over 10. Could someone who got it right tell us what goes inside the radical symbol? What number goes there, Stephanie? Good, 2,480. That is what goes there. Take the square root, do the two expressions, and you get that. Any comments, questions, concerns? Okay, give me a thumbs up if you got this one correct. Keep your thumb up. 1, 2, 3, 4. A lot of people. Good. Put your thumbs down. You know where you're going to see it? What was it? Got the square. Okay. Nathaniel, you know where you went wrong? Okay. Good. Any comments, questions, concerns? Good. Draw a line across your paper. Your classwork is going to be on page 110 in the workbook. You're going to do 26A, number 24, 23, 22, 19, 18, 16, 14, and 10. Now, there's one type of question that I haven't started asking you yet, that the textbook and workbook are going to ask you. And it's very simply, which method would make the most sense? So not only have I asked you to know all these different methods and know which one to do first, you should be able to recognize which one makes the most sense in which situation. So, that is your assignment. You have 15 minutes. Go ahead and begin. Of course, if you need guidance, assistance, reassurance, anything at all, let me know and I will come over and help. Feel free to communicate with your classmates about anything you're working on. If you want to see what your classmate got on a particular question, ask them. If they're not done, then they'll tell you they're not done yet. Pick up the colored pens. Let's see how we're doing with all of the different methods and now including quadratic formula. 26A. The equation you were asked to set up was the same equation except instead of a y you put an 80. when you solve the equation, you basically get the answer of 1, and you add 1 to 1997, and you get 1998. For 24, there is no solution. 23, negative 7.8 and 1.8. Number 22, there's only one solution. It's 7. Number 19, there's two solutions, negative 2.24 and positive 2.24. Number 18, there's more than one possible answer, but you have to be able to argue your position. It is not easy to factor, so the quadratic formula would be a very good choice. For number 19, factoring is the best choice because it's easy to factor that one. Number 14, finding square roots because it's in the form that using square roots is perfect for. And number 10, negative 1.45 and positive 1.25. So, there were a total of 9 questions. Make a fraction out of 9. Put the number you got correct. Calculate your percent. And now I will open up the floor for questions. Questions on any of these, keeping in mind that you are required to know all of this, tests, quizzes, and the EOC. Comments, questions, concerns? John? Number 26. Okay. All right, give me a thumbs up if you got number 26 correct. Good, not very many people. So I'm confused though. Why was, when I opened the floor up for questions, only one person asked? Matthew, do you know where you went wrong on that question? Okay, so stop right there. I know I put you on the spot, but I could have called on another 15 different people. Probably would have had the same reaction. So why didn't you just say, Mr. God, I don't understand what but you didn't get it right. Okay. But he did know. Malaysia, did you know how to do number 26? Okay. See, when you cross the threshold, when you walk from the white tile to the green tile, you have to know how to do this. So if you don't inquire or discuss, then you're going to leave here and you're still not going to know how to do it. Give me a thumbs up if you knew you were supposed to replace the y with an 80. Okay, put your thumbs down. So that's a reading issue. Because it says the number of eggs y. And y is expressed in billions, which means you don't have to write the full number, you just write the number of billions. And then part A says, write and solve an equation in which 80 billion eggs were produced. So that's a reading issue, that's not a math issue. If you did not know to put an 80 in place of y. Now, we are here. Edgar, you had said earlier something that was important. It was with my prompting. What must be true to solve any quadratic equation? Has to be equal to 0. So ladies and gentlemen, if you did not know that you had to get a 0 here, then you're not paying close enough attention to what's going on in class. You're sleepily walking through class and just robotically doing what I say. But you're not actually actively participating. That's a problem. Some of you are doing it as I say it right now. So how do we get the 0 in this case? Stephanie? Subtract 80 from both sides. Very good. This will then turn into a 0, and we're left with negative 0.27x squared plus 3.3x minus 3. So now let's go through the sequence. Is there a greatest common factor here? Yeah, what is it? Yeah, I think it is 0.3, but that's really messy. It's just kind of ugly, messy. So we could factor out a 0.3. I think that would actually work, but it wouldn't really help us very much. I mean, the idea of doing something is to actually help yourself, not to make things worse. But you could have factored out a 0.3, and I think that would do something. But let's assume you didn't recognize that. Is it a difference of two squares? No. Is it a perfect square trinomial? No. Can it be grouped? No. Could we use the trick?
Yes.
You could? Could someone tell us why using the trick would be very challenging in this case? Sebastian? Because of the decimals. The whole point of the trick is to actually use whole numbers. So when you have decimals, the trick's not going to be very fun. So what's our last resort that you just learned today? Quadratic formula. So A, B, C. Plug it all in and work it out. That's it. I'm not saying it's super fun. I'm just saying that you should have been able to do that. X equals the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared. Well, I don't know that yet, so I'll just write down B squared minus 4 times A times C. All over 2 times A. I don't know that yet, so I'll write it down. Now I'm going to go to my calculator because we've got lots of decimals. Does anyone have any questions on what you were supposed to do? So how many steps were there until we got to the quadratic formula? Really 1 or 2, depending on how you think of it. I mean, you put it in 80 and then subtract 80 from both sides, which is something that everyone in the room should have known how to do. So we got to up our level of attention to detail. Follow-up questions on this? So, when you go home this evening, if you got this question wrong, you should have this written down now. Now you need to finish the question on your own. Because doing something wrong and then not fixing it and not knowing where you went wrong is not okay. I'm not going to sit here and do this for you. This is what you're supposed to be practicing and learning how to do. Okay? You don't need me to do it for you. That's what the lesson was for. Now I've helped guide you through how to get to this point. Okay? Comments, questions on other ones? Chris? Okay, well that's something I... Okay, 22. Yeah, I mean, what do the instructions say above number 22? I have 3 people who can read the instructions. Let's go with Janae. What do the instructions say above number 22? Using any method. Using any method. So if we get everything onto the same side, we get x squared minus 14x plus 49 equals 0. What method is best here? Got 6 people. Danielle? Yeah, it's a perfect square trinomial. You should have been finished in 10 seconds. That's a perfect square, that's a perfect square. Square root of this times the square root of this times 2 comes out to that number. So this is going to factor like this. Boom, you're done. Set each factor equal to 0. X equals 7. I believe that just took me 10 seconds. And as I've said many a time, you guys are much brighter than I could ever hope to be. So if it can take me 10 seconds, you 10 seconds or less. Comments, questions, concerns? Okay, Chris, you also pointed out number 19, I believe. Number 19. Could someone tell us what method should be used for this one? Really don't recognize it already? It's been 2 days and you don't recognize it? Kayla? Square roots. Divide both sides by -10, you get x squared equals 5. Square root, x equals plus or minus 2.24. You have to be able to recognize all these different scenarios and situations. Instant. Chapter 10 test is coming up quickly. It's going to be next week. All right? Other comments, questions, concerns on any of these? Okay? Draw a line across your paper, your homework. It's page 696, numbers 14 through 50 even. And on page 698, you're going to do the ready to go on 1 through 3. That's a total of 22 questions. You are going to read the next 2 sections. This is not an optional assignment. This is required. And the next assessment you're going to have is a test on chapter 10. That will be next week.